بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين أما بعد فقد قال عز وجل بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس صدق الله العظيم. Again, following on from last week mainly what we said is in Surah Ikhlas in Qul Huwa Allahu Ahad is all about Allah. We understood the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the tawheed of Allah. This is one thing we appreciated a lot, how all these incidents happened. Surah Fil happened. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Surah Fil, Allah's given him this encouragement to carry on. Surah Quraysh happens. And again, all of this is related to the people of Makkah at that time. Then Ara'ayta alladhi, this relates to Munafiqeen and the Kuffar. Surah Kawthar again is the direct result of one of the incidents which happens, which is Abu Lahab. When the Prophet ﷺ's son passes away, Abu Lahab starts celebrating and being very excited about this. So that was an incident which was addressed in Surah Kawthar, where Allah gives the Prophet ﷺ Kawthar. So all of them have some kind of nuzul. Then Surah Fat, Surah Lahab, Ikhlas brings it all back together. That the whole point of everything, the whole point of the 23 years of Seerah, the whole point of all of it, and everything we learn about the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, everything revealed in the Quran, everything which the Prophet ﷺ went through, essentially was just for this one thing, which was revealed in Surah Ikhlas, which is Tawheed of Allah, the oneness of Allah, that everybody comes and worships one Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the first thing we came to. Then last week in Surah Falaq, we went through certain obstacles which would come because of the world, and the certain evils that we just need to be aware of. And as we know, the reason that both were revealed were because somebody cast a spell on the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ, last week we explained all of the virtues, how he describes both of the surahs. He said that there's nothing which is more eloquent than these two surahs. And then the Prophet ﷺ himself would recite both of these surahs, and then he would blow on his hands and rub it all over his body, starting from his head and coming down, and rub it all over his body. So this is the way we can use the surah for ourselves, for our own protection. Now one of the main differences we'll notice is that in Surah Falaq we have Qul A'udhu bi Rabbil Falaq. And then, so Allah is mentioned once only, that's it. So قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ. And then مِنْ شَرِّ مَا خَلَقَ, مِنْ شَرِّ this, from the evil of this, from the evil of this, from the evil of the three things we mentioned. So Allah is only mentioned once, so we only actually seek protection once. However, in this surah we have قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ مَلِكِ النَّاسِ إِلَهِ النَّاسِ. Allah is mentioned 3 times, 3 separate descriptions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's a key difference, and this will explain. This is all, which is why you notice the sheets are a bit different. We're not quite as colourful as usual. The reason is because the virtues and the reason it was revealed was all done last week. Surah Falaq and the Nas, the virtues are the same, because most of the hadith mentioned mu'awwidhatain together, the virtues together. The Prophet would recite both and blow over himself. Prophet described both of them as the best thing which was revealed to him. And then the other narrations that we have about when it was revealed, and the Prophet ﷺ read each verse, and then one of the knots from the doll opened slowly, and the magic, he felt relief from the magic. All of this was both surahs. So now this is just the link between Surah Nas and Surah Falaq we'll try and cover. So in the green, that's where we see all of this kind of thing. And actually in the red, the 2 key differences are shown. Now, one of the main, the reason in Surah Nas we seem to have more desperation. We call to Allah more. We call Allah, Qul A'udhu bi Rabbil Nas, Malik Nas. We keep calling Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The reason we have the different names we'll cover, but this covers, the amount we're calling Allah is more. We have more desperation for Allah. We worry about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's almost like it's a more desperate attempt. So the thing we seeking protection from, we'll notice a slight difference there as well. So in the last surah, we noticed that we were seeking protection from things. The first thing was ghasikin idha waqab, the night. Second thing was magicians, if they blow. And things which we don't, and someone else is jealous of us, we don't have any control. If somebody wants to be jealous of somebody else, then the person who's being jealous, the person who he's being jealous about can't really do anything about that. They can't really stop him. However, we still seek refuge from these things, because the world can do these kind of things. However, in this surah we find that the thing we seek in refuge is something within our control, something we can do something about. We can actually protect ourselves. And therefore, when we have the capability, when we have the ikhtiyar, then obviously we become responsible. Therefore, that becomes a lot more important. So this thing affects our iman then, isn't it? If we have a car accident, then that doesn't necessarily affect our iman. As long as we have sabr and we generally deal with it in a patient and civilized way, it's not a problem always, because it's affecting our dunya. So with our dunya it's a problem, but with regards to the akhirah it's not a problem. if somebody is jealous of us and then they come and try and harm us in some way, again, that doesn't affect our iman as long as we're patient and we deal with that properly. However, in this verse, when shaitan whispers something to us, now then we have that choice. Do we act on that whisper or do we control ourselves? And if we act on it, then that's harmful for our hereafter. And if we don't act on it, it's very beneficial for our hereafter and it saves us in this world. That's why we ask Allah for protection more times. This is one thing we realize. And also it's out of our control in falak. Here it's within our control. It's something we are required to do something about. So these two kind of come together. And also the things that we fear, they came more. There was a long list of them. So we only asked Allah, Qul a'udhu bi rabbil falaq, we asked Allah once, and then we had a long list of things that we want, 3 separate things. Here we ask Allah 3 times, we call on Allah 3 times, but the thing we seek refuge from is only one. Overall it's one thing. Min sharril waswasil khannas alladhi, it's all a description of that one thing. So that's there's almost like a relation there. We ask Allah, we call on Allah once, and 3 things we seek refuge from. Here we call on Allah 3 times, and we seek refuge from just the one thing. This is the key thing that this is one of the main differences that we notice. Also, the waswas are internal. Is something which affects us spiritually. So it's very, very important that we control them as well. Whereas falak is more external. If somebody else does something which is beyond, it's not really something which we can always do something about. So that's the key message about the difference. Then moving on to the surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He starts it off, and again we'll notice very similar, that the layout is very similar even when we're reading. So we have Qul starts at the beginning, both use Qul. Qul we mentioned last week, one of the main benefits of using Qul is that when you recite it, then as soon as you recite the thing after Qul, you're acting upon the command of Allah. There's a command in the Quran, Qul, say, and then everything that comes after it, we're meant to say it, isn't it? So when we recite everything that comes after Qul, then we're acting on the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is our obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is really good. So we start off the surah just by showing how much we want to act upon what. And then what we do is we seek refuge. So by doing what Allah, saying it out loud and saying it for ourselves, we need Allah. It shows our submission. We explained the benefit of Qul last week. And then by putting ourselves, immediately obeying Allah, by saying what Allah says Qul, and then we say what Allah tells us to say. So this shows our submission, and then we ask Allah for something. Now, although we mentioned last week as well, and we've done this in depth last week as well, but really it doesn't mean to seek refuge. It means more to completely enter ourselves into the refuge of Allah, to completely put ourselves into the protection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a very submissive form. So this is what we learn from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here. Qul a'udhu bi rabbin nas. Rabbin nas, Rabb we've done in Surah Fatiha, and it came last week as well. Rabb, we went into very details. There's 5 different meanings that we went through and how they go through the stages. So obviously the notes are there in the thing as well, inshallah. So we can go back through Surah Fatiha and look at that. But generally, the key thing we done, and which the Prophet mentioned last week as well, is that Rabb has an opposite, which is Abd. So as soon as we say Rabb, we declare that we are slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rabb generally also can be like, for example, in Surah Fil, when before we started Surah Fil, we had the background one where Abraha is coming forward and he's trying to attack the Prophet, the house of Allah. So now when he comes and speaks to the grandfather of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then he says to the grandfather that what have you come for? And then he says that I have come for my camels. So Abraha has come to destroy the Kaaba, and on the way he's stolen some of Abdul Muttalib's camels. So then Abdul Muttalib says that, can I have my camels back, please? So then Abraha goes that I've come to destroy your whole heritage, essentially, or your whole source of income, your main source of income, all your sanctity and honor, and you're worried about some camels. And then he says, Ana Rabbul Ibl, I am the Rabb of the camels, which is how, even to some extent, if we have a household, then very often the father is the Rabb of that household. If we have a company, then the owner or the director will usually be the Rabb of that company. So small houses, a house can have a Rabb, a company can have a Rabb, and this is how it works. So generally a small kind of person who's responsible for a small group of people. So this is how Rabb is used. So Rabb can also be used for a human. This is one thing which we learn. Now, why does Allah say Nas? Remember in Falak there was a lot of reasons for Falak. There was 2-3 reasons. So now why does Allah use Nas here? Nas is used because here the person that we're seeking refuge and the people that we're trying to protect from the evil of the whispers of shaitan are going to be the Nas. So then by referring to the Nas as in relation to the Rabb, and in relation to the Ilah, and in relation to the King, then he's the one who's going to protect us from any kind of evil influence that comes. So the Nas are very, very relevant here, because the thing that is evil, which is the whispers, they're going to affect the Nas themselves. So that's why we remind that the Nas are completely controlled by Allah, and that we ourselves, we need to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then, so on the back there's a very small table. We just splits it up. So Ilahin Nas, Malikin Nas, and Rabbin Nas. So Rabb, Malik, and Ilah. So Malik is the second word. Now Malik generally indicates to a king. So when a person, he's in an area and so for example, Rabb would be the local company or where we work, our employer, our parents, something like that. The king would then be for us, the local council, and then if it's a bit more important, the police to some extent, and then the government in this country. So that would be our Malik kind of thing. And then after that, Malikin Nas, Ilahin Nas. Ilah, there's no human can ever be an Ilah. So to an extent, a Malik, for example, in Saudi, we have Malik, whatever his name is. Malik, what's his name? Salman. So Malik, we call him Malik Salman. He's the king. So again, Allah is Malikin Nas. So Allah refers to Himself as a king. But it's not, obviously the Saudis are very anti-shirk, so they're not going to, so you're allowed to call a human a king as well. However, this last word, which is Ilah, which obviously as we know, La ilaha illallah, no worthy of worship. So a God, essentially. So a God, you can never refer to a human, obviously, as a God. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He becomes Ilah, the whole world, it now covers the whole world. So if it started locally at our local company, and then we went to the police and our regional authority, or maybe the EU, or maybe the United Nations, if you're going really far. Now Ilah it covers every single individual in the world, and every individual has that one Ilah. So Allah covers every single one, and it goes up in this order. So now generally in our life, we may start off and we may have a small problem. So then we try and get it resolved through our company, or through our employer, or through our parents, or through our family, through our local people who we may have some kind of affiliation with. And then if it's a bigger problem, then we'll go a bit higher. So then we may go to the courts, we may go to the police, we may go to the government, or try and hire a solicitor, or somehow resolve a bigger issue. And then if it's even bigger than that, they can't help us if we've done something wrong, or if everybody says, you're going to lose this case that you have, then we realize the only person who can turn to is Allah at that time. So now by using this stage, Allah is all three of them. Allah's relation to us is in all three stages. Allah doesn't suddenly only start helping when we lose hope in everyone else. Allah is not only the solution to our problem when the people that are close to us stop helping us, or if the police give up hope on helping us. Allah right from the beginning was there to help, which is why Allah declares Rabbun Nas. So then we realize this, that right from the beginning, whenever we have even the smallest of problem, straight away we turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, rather than trying to resolve it always ourselves. Obviously we use the means, just like we mentioned the other week, that when we become ill, Islamically one of the first things we should try and do is give sadaqah straight away. And we pray, and we make two nafil, and we pray to Allah that this illness goes away. And then also we take them. Nobody says don't take the means. Obviously we should take the means as well. But it's very important that we realize where our aqidah actually lies in regards to this issue. And the stronger our iman is, the more we'll turn to Allah. And then the more you do that, then it's only then when a person in small things regularly on a regular basis turns to Allah, reminds himself of Allah, only then will we realize, see results. So then we see a result when we do dua and when we don't do dua. We'll see the help of Allah coming in our lives, and when we see that this all helps with our iman and our aqidah in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is something which really helps. So Rabb, the difference between Rabb and Malik, Malik generally indicates on the authority of Allah. So Rabb covered a lot of things, as we know, the ownership of Allah, the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all powerful and we're His slaves. But Malik emphasizes on the authority, the fact that Allah can do what He wants. So we can, in this world, we can also, to the extent, say we're Rabb of certain things, but we don't have full authority. So for example, this mosque is a perfect example. So we have a masjid and then we build an extension, but we do it without authority, we do it without permission. Then obviously afterwards then you run into problems. So we require, we may own the building fully, but we can't do what we want with it. Even with our car. Now we may have a very nice car, a German car, and it may go very fast, but we can't drive it as fast as we want. because we don't have that authority. So a house and a car, things like this, we have it, but we can't drive it as we want. We can't build it how we want, even though it's ours, even though we own the land and everything. Now Malik takes away that kind of restriction. So now when Allah says Malik An-Naas, Allah has full authority. He can do what He wants with whatever. And this is something that just helps us appreciate the blessings that we have, that He could take anything away at any point without anyone questioning because of His authority. So that's how Malik is covered. And then the last one is Ilah. Ilah has two meanings. One is worship and one is obedience. So now this is the crux of everything. That what do we actually worship? That if Allah is Ilah, then do we look at Him as the first solution to everything? Is He the being that we turn to does our life evolve around Him? Or many people, their life ends up evolving around money instead? That if I can accumulate money, I'll solve this problem. If I can have a certain respect in society, if I can get married to a certain person, I'll solve this problem. So the solution to problems are different things. But Allah says, if Allah is the Ilah, then He's the only one worth worshipping to the extent that He'll actually solve the problem as soon as we start worshipping Him. This is one of the things we learn from Allah being Ilah An-Naas. And throughout this whole theme, it really it really helps us understand a very, very important thing, because we're coming on to seek refuge from Allah in a certain important thing. So now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very ironic, mashallah, when so when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us that if you accept me as the Lord and you properly understand how much how to remember me, then the effect and the whispers of shaitan, when they come, they will not affect a person whose heart is dhakir. If a person's managed to make his heart dhakir, if he's managed to get Allah into his heart already, then shaitan's whispers will come, but then the heart won't be affected. And we'll come to that later as well. But this is one really important thing that we learn. Also, one thing that we learn, shaitan's effect came on many people in the world. But there's one person in the Quran who continuously is mentioned by Allah as kind of the enemy of Islam. Anyone want to have a guess? One person in the Quran, continuously coming. Shaitan's the person who affects the person. Shaitan's number one, this person's number two. Second shaitan. Abu Lahab was mentioned. We mentioned, that's a good, mashallah, clever guess. But he only comes in one part of the Quran. So Fir'aun is mentioned throughout Surah Baqarah, in so many parts of the Quran, because of Bani Israel always mentioned, Musa alayhi salam is always mentioned, and then with them Fir'aun's problems come all the time. And then so many times the group of Fir'aun, his courtiers, and then the magicians, he calls them to cause fitna as well. And then obviously they enter into Iman. But now Fir'aun refers to himself in three different ways: as a Rabb, as a Malik, and as a Ilah. So for example, as we know, very famous, Fir'aun says, Ana Rabbukumul A'la, I am your biggest Rabb, I am your biggest Lord. And he meant it as in the Allah way, that I am the big Rabb. And then with regards to he goes, that Ali Salim Mulkum Misr, that do I not have the authority over Egypt? That I can do what I want in Egypt. Who can stop me? Who can get in my way? So he even declared mulk for himself. He declared the second one. And then once he was talking to Bani Israel, he said that Ma alimtu lakum min ilahin ghayri, that I don't think you've got any ilah, you've got no God apart from me, you've got no one who you can worship apart from me. So he declared all three for himself. Now this is caused generally obviously by one very evil trait, which is arrogance. So generally it's caused by arrogance. It's not, the fact that Fir'aun, the thing that will stop us from even saying that we have control over things in society is the fact that we have this humility within us, that we don't have so much power. So Fir'aun's arrogance led him to declaring himself to be the God of the world, to be in charge of the world. So Fir'aun was happy to say that. This is what the arrogance that he had. So now we all have some kind of arrogance. So we don't have to become Fir'aun to be affected by these kind of things. We can have a lower level of arrogance. We can be like, we can say that, my job does certain things, my money does certain things, my authority in society does certain things. The fact that I have a certain family who can dig me out of certain problems. I have a lawyer who's a good friend of mine. So nobody messes with me. Now we put our full trust in these people, and we say these people will be our salvation. But then it's just the arrogance that I can do what I want. I can, do things the way I want to do them. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is what we seek refuge from, that we take arrogance out of us right from the beginning. So we don't call ourselves Rabb in any way, or Malik or Ilah. We take this kind of arrogance out of ourselves. So that way we don't put our trust in other things. So otherwise we can be just very, very similar to Fir'aun. So to declare ourselves masters of ourselves, even that I can do what I want. I don't need an Allah. I don't need Allah to tell me how to live my life, or how to, how many times I should pray, or whether or not I should fast. So this is exactly the problem that Fir'aun had. So we will go down exactly the same way. Obviously, it's a very extreme example. We're not saying that we're all going to declare ourselves gods of the world very soon. But the issue is that we do, to some degree, we declare ourselves independent of the guidance of Allah. We declare, I don't need the guidance of Allah to live my life. So it's very, very similar, this analogy. So also, Nas sometimes can come from Nisyan. So we said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Rabb, but this is the whole point of this story. The whole reason we spent 15 minutes discussing it. How come Allah has described it in so much detail? The more we talk about Allah, the more this dhikr comes into our heart. The more we understand, the more our heart will be full of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when our heart becomes full of Allah, then Allah talks about Himself so much, because Nas comes from Nisyan. Humans are known to forget. So now we'll forget automatically, but the more we remember, and the more detailed and more and the better we understand Allah, the more we'll remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is very important for what comes next. So then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says next that min sharril waswasil khannas. So qul a'udhu birabbin nas, malikin nas, ilahin nas, and the fourth verse, min sharril waswasil khannas. As you can see, I prepared this quite late, so I kind of done the easy part and took up a bit more space, and the last three verses we just kind of translated. But inshallah, we'll try and elaborate on these a little bit more. So from the evil secret whisperer. So waswas is actually the person doing it, not the whisper itself. Waswasa is the whisper. Waswas is the person who does the whispering, and also he does it secretly. Now, why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refer to him as waswas as opposed to waswasa? Why not just the waswasa? Why the whole waswas? Because obviously that has the added benefit. So if it were just the waswasa, we'd only seek protection from the whisper of shaitan. But shaitan overall as a whole entity has promised to do everything he can possibly to try and lead us astray. So the more shaitan works, he'll do a variety of things. He's planning, and he's putting other people in certain places, and sometimes his waswasa even to other people in order to lead us astray. All of these things are things which we all need protection from. So the whole entity of shaitan, we seek protection from the whole entity of shaitan in order to do that. And this is why also khannas, khannas is a word which generally it can also be referred to a star which twinkles and then stops. So it kind of gets bright and then it kind of comes back. So it goes big and comes back. This is very similar to shaitan. Shaitan's waswasa, he whispers, then he takes a step back. He whispers something else, then he comes out. He whispers something else, almost on the defense. And this is back to the dhikr. The first part of the surah was all the dhikr of Allah, the understanding of Allah, how we should have Allah in our lives as a default. As a default position is that Allah's in my life. So then when shaitan's whisper comes along, we have that, as we know, there's many different narrations which say that when a heart is dhakir, then the shaitan will go away. Obviously when the adhan happens, shaitan runs very, very fast away. So all of these different narrations that we have. So now shaitan, he will do waswasa, but if he finds the heart dhakir and impenetrable, then he'll have to go away. So this is one thing we learned, that shaitan won't always be able to penetrate. Sometimes he'll have to go away. So we try and keep our heart dhakir as much as we can. We try not to forget. We try and do the first three things in the surah, and we do as much dhikr. And then as a result of that, when shaitan's waswasa comes, we won't fall prey to shaitan. This is the key thing that we need. So then shaitan will eventually, he'll fall back on himself. So he'll go back and he'll retreat. And this is something that we'll learn. So he won't give up. But when he finds the heart dhakir, he'll give a whisper and then he'll back off again. So this is the key thing that we learn. So min sharril waswasil khannas. So we seek refuge from the evil of shaitan's whispers. And alladhi yuwaswis fi sudurin nas. So shaitan is that being who will do waswasa fi sudurin nas, in the hearts of the people. So as we know, sudur indicates to actually not the heart, the chest. And the heart in Arabic is qalb. Yeah, and the qalb is the place of iman, the place where kufr can come, the place where evils can come, and that's where shaitan tries to get to. But Allah describes shaitan, his whisper only comes into the chest. So we can almost imagine that we've got the heart, and then around it we've got the chest, and shaitan's whispers come into the chest. We ourselves decide what we let come into our hearts. So now if our hearts were dhakir from before, if the first three verses had fully come into our heart, then the penetration would never happen. We'd always remember that Allah's, being worshippers and slaves of Allah is always, it's more worth than giving ourselves up to shaitan. We'll value that a lot more than giving ourselves up to shaitan. So that's how we'll protect ourselves. The protection all comes first. And then also Allah now, He explains all of these attacks of shaitan. He explains to us in the Quran that shaitan's aim is to lead us astray, and that his whispers will come into our heart. So when we get evil thoughts, we get the encouragement to do something bad, or something which we know we're not meant to be doing, then we realize that we've got to protect ourselves. So that will, shaitan's not got the power to make us do it. He's got the power to put it into our sudur, and then we ourselves decide whether or not we take that on. We decide ourselves. Min al-jinnati wan-nas. Obviously, as we know, shaitan, to understand this, I think somebody asked me the other day as well, that when you have that who is shaitan and who is iblis, and then how come It says min al-jinnati wan-nas. It says people and jinnat, they're all shaitan. So we might have a shaitan, walking around outside, so who we can see. So Iblis, generally when the Quran refers to it, is the very specific shaitan, a jinn, who when he was ordered to prostrate to Adam alayhi salam, he refused, and that was the specific. Then he made a vow, and he got life all the way to the day of Qiyamah to continue misguiding people. This was his aim, and now his aim is to misguide people as much as he can. So then he makes people follow him, and he makes people take out tasks to mislead people as much as possible. And he has, he makes teams and he organizes the jinnat, and very often he organizes the humans as well. He can use different vehicles. Many a time we'll find that people can lead us astray, human beings can lead us astray. That's why we've got to be very careful with our company. So if we spend time with somebody, and that person, every time we spend time with them, we do something wrong, we end up lying or cheating, or just doing something evil, or looking at wrong things, or speaking about evil things, or backbiting, then they'll fall into this category of people who just by nature they call towards evil. So company is very, very effective, and even this verse indicates on that the company we take from humans, which kind of people we choose to spend time with, and whether or not, and even in non-Muslims we find these traits. We can find them being very honest, and there can be people who lead us to good, and many of them who hate swearing. So you spend time with them, you stop swearing. You spend time with them, you be honest. You spend time with them, you speak nicely, speak softly. And British society, if you compare Pakistan, like I went a couple of months ago to Britain, the general akhlaq is better. So now when I go to Pakistan, then I adapt to the society, which means I stop saying sorry every time I bump into somebody. You stop generally smiling at people. Because if you smile at people think you're weird. So here, when you wake up in the morning, especially in the morning, I don't know why everyone's so happy in the morning. You go for a walk outside, and you expect people to smile at you and they say good morning. If you've done that in other countries, in our culture, unfortunately, so there's certain traits, if you spend time with people enough, these traits rub off. So we ourselves start smiling, which is the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. No one disagrees with that when we meet somebody, biwajhin talq, very, very, very dhahir hadith we find in very authentic narrations, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would say that in itself is a sadaqah, to smile at people, to come with a cheerful face, not to always be grumpy. So this is the sunnah, and it's affected because of the environment. So we can appreciate the people that we spend time. If we spend time with grumpy people all the time, we ourselves will find it difficult to smile. So this is something we should try and take out time as well. Sometimes we should seek out certain qualities. Sometimes we find certain people, they're very confident. Whenever they speak, they can come across and just say whatever they want, and they're very good at coming across with people. They're very good at affecting people. And this is something we see that from the seerah of Rasulullah. He had a massive effect on the Sahaba radiallahu anhu. So his sunnah is to, his aim was to spread Islam as much as he could. And very often he'd use his character and his qualities and his friendship and his confidence to affect the Sahaba radiallahu anhu. So these qualities are something, if we want to become da'is, if you want to become people fully on the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to also call that we ourselves, we have infectious personalities. That when people see us, they just want to smile like us. They want to smile. We make people smile, and we have this. And this is one of the most important things. And it's a very undebated thing. There's certain things which are debated in religion. Should you do this? Should you do that? Should you, try and should we, call people into the mosque? Should we go give da'wah to non-Muslims? These kind of things. But our character as a da'wah to non-Muslims and to Muslims as well. And especially, unfortunately, nowadays, sometimes the more practicing people become, sometimes we find they become less smiley, and they become so pious that they forget to smile. So this is something we just need to keep in mind, that our character is a massive da'wah always, more than a leaflet that we give out, more than when we specifically go knocking on someone's door as a non-Muslim. Just our character and the way we smile and come across, and the confidence that we portray in ourselves, in our religion, in the dress that we're wearing, and the fact that we're following sunnah, that confidence that we have, it very, very often rubs off and is a massive da'wah. So I make dua Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives me and all of us the ability to understand and act upon this surah. Just a couple of things before